say you think 10 years from now, what are you going to carry in terms of memories and how do you think the legacy of this 2024 squad will be remembered?
Well, it's a great question, and one that probably requires a bit more thought to answer properly. But I suspect I will still think about footy the same way I do today. I think the time to think about 2014 is a long, long way into the future when I'm truly out of footy. We encourage our guys to embrace the idea that Lee Matthews once said to the group that I played for, and his coach once said to the group he played for, which is that it's always later than you think. And if you start looking too far forward or reminiscing too much, you'll miss the most important bit. But to sort of answer the question more in the spirit that I think you intended, I think that we are in a bit of a period of transition that has been clear to us for quite a while, even going into the 22 season. But that's exciting. You know, sometimes I think those sort of descriptions are brought up in a manner that suggests that you're managing expectations, and that's not what we're doing at all. We had some young players come into our team in 22 who ended up being very, very important at the end of that season. And we're not trying to draw a comparison necessarily to 22, more just to make the point that over the last 10 years or so, we've been sort of in a constant state of evolution, and we don't think that's slowed down in 24. If anything, it's accelerated. So that's the thing that makes us excited as much as anything.
Is Tanner considered for this game? Is he close to selection?
Tanner?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was. So he's fit and he'll play VFL footy. He's missed 4 games. As I earmarked at the time, he needed surgery on his wrist but was able to run really quickly. So he's in really good running shape. We just thought it was prudent that he gets some match practice, and he's been handling the balls for quite a while and seems to be unaffected in that respect. But again, just thought it was prudent to get some match practice, and optimistic he'll be available for AFL footy next week.
Saw Toby out there as well after the surgery. It's not good to see from one of your big men.
No, it's not, and it's frustrating for Toby, and it is frustrating for us, but we're determined to keep our eye on the prize there. So, you know, just roll your eyes and fall asleep for the next 20 seconds, because I'm going to say the same thing that I've said for a long time. He's a long-term player for us. We're not focused on the short term. Doesn't mean he can't play AFL footy for us. We're confident that he will through this period where he's developing into the sort of player that can stand up to the rigours of consecutive weeks of AFL footy and consecutive seasons. He's not there yet, and this injury, in my mind at least, is just another indication that he's not quite ready for that, but we're invested in long term, and he's going to be a good player for the club. We're just not going to rush it.
I feel like you've got a bit more clarity about Cam Guthrie's return, how he's going with his recovery, a little bit more clear about when he might come back.
I think there are slightly different estimates on that around the place. And that's, well, I sort of, estimates, is that the right word? Because to be frank, like, we're sort of guessing a little bit, because there's a when can he come back from injury, and then there's how quickly is he going to bounce back into something like match fitness. You know, he's been doing a lot of training and loading, but that's an open question at the moment, and I just don't want to, again, I don't want to sound like we're managing expectations by saying, look, he's missed a lot of footy and it's going to be slow. But also don't want to be overly optimistic. And I probably made that mistake earlier in the year because I was confident he'd come back and just hit the ground running, and it didn't work out that way. And this was a new injury, so that complicated things a bit. But we've got 6 games to go in the season. We've just got to make sure the team plays well enough to give him enough time to get back and be firing. But I think the point, it's a bit like the Toby one, albeit players at different ends of their career. We want to be sure that he can come in and perform. So the signs are looking good over the last couple of weeks, to your question. Did you have something more specific?
Oh, no, just the last time I asked you, you were unclear, obviously. I thought maybe the terrain had changed a little bit. You had a little bit more clarity on when he may come back.
Yeah, I'm going to ask for just a little bit of help there. Is that have we given that impression publicly? Sorry, I don't follow all our public communication.
Yeah, we've had a few weeks on it, but that's what he's saying, it's subject to change in a given week. Like, that's a hard one to actually pin a time on.
Yeah.
So I'll just repeat that because you probably can't hear
Yeah, that's fine.
Andrew. Yeah.
Just last time we spoke, it was unclear about when.
Yeah. So I think that's a reasonable way of thinking about it. Yeah, it's clearer. It's clearer that he'll come back, whereas previously we're a bit. It's a bit sort of open-ended, and we didn't want to say, look, he'll definitely be back because the risk would be that we'd keep saying that every week. And I say this a bit. I worry that it gives you the impression that we've misled you, and that's the last thing we want to do.
Look, would it be premature to say you're confident he may come back before finals, or you would be going that far?
No, I'll go that far. He'll be back before finals. Yeah.
What do you make of Charlie Cameron and Toby Bedford getting off last night?
Look, I haven't followed the detail. It was relayed to me that the decision was more based on an error in law. Is that the right terminology? So I guess that suggests that they haven't really given more clarity around the reasonableness of those tackles. And so maybe it remains an open question. Look, I spoke about it on Monday night. My view hasn't changed. When I first saw both of those, my blink response was that they shouldn't have been held liable for the damage. But I think the whole footy world understands that when a player gets concussed, it seems to be that now the burden has shifted to the tackler in this instance needing to prove why he's not liable, as opposed to any presumption of innocence. Now, whether that's the right thing or not, I think the AFL, I suggest the AFL will sort of take the time at the end of the year, which is the right time to do it, to sit back and reassess these things. I just hope that they don't get to the point where they say, when there's a concussion, we need to somehow close all the loopholes to the point where if you concuss someone, you're liable, because that would change the game, and I don't think many people would support that.
Not to sound erratic, but should we just get rid of the tribunal and AFL hands out a ban and players just have to accept it? Should we do that, or should we just, is it good as it is right now?
I'd have to think about all that a lot more. I mean, I think there's always things within the way the AFL administer the competition that are easy to be critical of, but it's a lot harder to suggest solutions to these. It's, you know, being the critic is the easy bit. What I would actually take a step back and congratulate them, that's probably not the right word, but would recognise is that I think over the years they have made tweaks, and I think we all get a little bit frustrated that common sense can't be overlaid to some of the MRO decisions, because there is this criteria that he has no choice but to abide by. But maybe we forget too quickly that having to go to a tribunal hearing to defend the smallest thing was a nonsense. And so we're better than we were then. And so I think the hope is that everyone accepts that it'll never be perfect, but each year they try to get it better. That's a prudent way to administer the competition.
What are you hoping to see out of Jai Clark as he goes back to the VFL, Chris?
Well, we think he's played pretty well in the AFL team, and as much as anything, it's about Mitch Nevitt playing really well. And I'd remind you, he came in to our team against Essendon at the MCG, played really well, was picked in the team the following week, had to withdraw with illness that morning, and we couldn't get him back into the team the following week. So he was really unlucky. Went back to the VFL and played really well and forced his way back into the team. So it is much more about Nevitt than it is about Clark. But I guess what we'd ask from Jai is to keep working on what he's been working on, and he's been doing it well at AFL level, but do it in a similar way to a few of those other guys that have gone back and played well, Sean Manor and Mitch Nevitt, and force his way back into what's becoming a pretty kind of competitive team to work your way into.
We won't know how you structure up until 7:30 tomorrow night, but was there a level of consideration given to, with Ugle-Hagan, Darcy, return of Norton, that DeCurran goes back behind the footy and that Stanley would come into the team?
Yeah. And it's a little bit more obvious this week with the the personnel the opposition have, but it's a conversation that we spend a lot of time on every week. Feels like we have the whole time I've been at Geelong. You know, it's just never been a set and forget with our ruck setup in particular, but that's not a negative either. It's more, I think, a reflection of the options that we've got at our disposal. But yeah, it's pretty clear this week with the firepower they have that it requires some extra thought. And yeah, to be honest, we're going to keep thinking about it over the next 24 hours or so.
Could Tom maybe spend more time in defence? I know obviously he's done very well in the midfield at times. Would that be a consideration as well?
Yeah, again, it's always a consideration. And there's really solid arguments for both. But I'll just repeat what I've said with him the last couple of weeks. I even said it to him during the week. You know, we think it's going well, but if we moved him to another spot, it wouldn't be because that was a good move. It would be because he's a good player and he can play anywhere in our view. So it's a little bit dictated by what the team needs, but we're still in the position, I think, where we're trying to maximise what he can give us, and it's not 100% certain. Well, in fact, I am 100% certain that it's not just locking him into one spot and forgetting about it. We'll just keep assessing it as it evolves.
Might be Hale tomorrow. You ever played in Hale before?
Hale, yeah, I have, yeah. Yeah, and it's well and truly winter, isn't it? I think it's been a little bit, not evading the question, but it has been, my observation, it's been a little bit of an unusual year in that normally the sort of scoring and the attacking footy slows down as we get into winter, and it's almost gone the opposite way this year. I'm not exactly sure why that is. Maybe the conditions have been a little bit better, but yeah, maybe it's just a delayed start to that. You know, those really difficult footy conditions. But it's Geelong. Who knows what it's going to be like, except cold.
You've made a few positional changes. Obviously, it's been pretty well documented. But have you tweaked anything with your own personal style? Are you coaching over the past 3 games? Anything that you've changed much?
No, I don't think so. It's probably for others to answer. But I don't see our coaching group as any different to what we're trying to do with the whole team, and that's keep trying to find a way to get better and be open to evolution. Like the only thing, say it quite a bit, like the only thing we know for sure is this time next year we'll think about footy a little bit differently. We just don't know what those things are. And I think I said it a couple of weeks ago in this forum, we're just not, I just don't think anyone's good enough that they can sort of sit back and say, well, we just play our style and, you know, whatever happens, happens. You know, we'll just be too good. We need to keep striving. And that's part of having, you know, some younger players coming into the team, be open to what they can bring. And so, yeah, I think that extends to our coaches as well. But look, I don't want it to sound too self-congratulatory, but I didn't think we dropped our bundle when we weren't going that well. You know, we had some confidence that we would get through it, but we also weren't. You know, sunshine and rainbows, everything's fine, don't worry about it. So always striving for balance, I think, is the answer.
But having characters like Pat back or even Lawson Humphries, how does that sort of change the dynamic or the feel around the team? Is there anything you've noticed having those kinds of guys back in the side?
Yeah, I have. And I think it's always true that when you bring either experienced players like Pat back into the team or, you know, new guys like Lawson who play a little bit differently, it does change you and you should be open to those changes. We've been really impressed with Pat's leadership. But again, I don't know that there's such a thing as the great leader who's had a really positive impact, but he's just been playing terribly. Like, the most important thing is that they come in and impact on the field, which clearly Pat has done. But the combination of Pat and Tom Stewart, I think, even the fact that they're playing, you know, in closer proximity to each other, but those two have really led us well through this period, and they're probably responsible as anyone for sort of keeping things up. And maybe Pat was just thinking, don't worry guys, when I come back everything will be fine. But the confident, good players tend to think that way.
It was better for the run. I noticed that he said at the BNF that he struggled with the captaincy last year at times. Do you think he's better for that experience?
I think everyone is second year round. But I think, without putting words in his mouth, that was an acknowledgement of what a big hole Joel would leave. And we knew no one could fill it. I hope we didn't talk ourselves into it, but better to, try to live in reality than pretend something's not happening. But yeah, I just think it's one of those things where you don't know what it's going to be like until you actually do it. And it did coincide with us having some problems last year as well. So sometimes we can jump to conclusions with these things.
Ollie Henry, third game as sub, or do you try and avoid 3 consecutive for a player?
Yeah, we won't play him as a sub. So without being specific around who will be our sub, no, it won't be him.